Welcome to Tip Off, coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona today, here as we roll through the preseason. It is October 9th. It is 8:58 in the morning, Arizona time. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz NBA insider. So glad to be with you back in the mainland. Hope everyone's well. Uh, I usually do the little tour of the hotel room, but I didn't put my outside webcam on. So you have this one. So here you go. Here's the tour of the hotel room. Big bottle of water. Some scary person. It's the art tour. The art tour of Phoenix, Arizona. Boxed water is better. See, boxed water is better. So there it is. Kind of a hip, modern, lack of art room. And I have a really cool view of a gravel pit on top of a roof. So hope you're good. There's the breakdown. Try to always give you a little insight of what's on the road. AT out there is the one who started this little phenomena, so they're responsible. A bunch of things to talk about for you. Jazz have just announced open scrimmage is coming October 16th. But interesting, actually worth noting, assuming that things aren't done by accident, they're calling it open practice. So maybe not open scrimmage. Doors will open at 5:30. It starts at 6:30. So it will be a look inside a Jazz practice. It says Quinn Snyder will lead the practice, wear a microphone to describe drills and real game scenarios that they will showcase, and I will be on hand to interview players throughout the event, says the press release. Select concession stands will be open during the event, including new food options such as Chick-fil-A, Cup Bop Korean barbecue, food, non-alcoholic beverages will all be discounted by 10%. And Jazz are also encouraging junior Jazz participants to attend the scrimmage and wear their junior Jazz to help tip off Junior NBA Week. The Jazz are the leader in the industry in their junior program. What Mr. Martinez and the crew does with the program is better than it's the model program in the NBA. No other way to say it. So completely awesome. That to have that in Junior NBA Week. So put that on the calendar for Friday, October 16th. We look forward to having you out there. Remember, season tickets are available and single game tickets are available. It's going to be a fun season. You want to be a part of it. So get your group together and get some tickets, and let's hit the NBA 5. Chicago's an interesting team to keep a look at. There's all this fire about Jimmy Butler and Derrick Rose and not getting along, and there's two things I think are going on. One is the Chicago Tribune beat writer Casey Johnson is so good, has been there for so long. I think it actually forces some of the other writers to be a little extravagant to try to get themselves heard. So I think there's a little bit of that. There also just has been so much fire around the Bulls, and frankly around Derrick Rose. I think some of it's got to be true. There's just something that's not copacetic there. It's a fascinating team. If Joakim Noah, a year ago, if we think about this a year ago, Chicago and Oklahoma City were the two teams everyone thought were going to the finals. And in a sense, nothing has changed on either of those two teams other than coaching and health. So Oklahoma City doesn't make it last year, not because of Scott Brooks, but because of health. They just get injured. They fall apart. Now, they change up that roster, and Dion Waiters now and Ennis Canner and guys that don't fit the Oklahoma City Thunder philosophy and look and kind of who they are and DNA. Very offensive-minded, non-defensive players, not very good team-oriented players. Chicago has virtually the same team. It's another chance for Mirotic and Gibson and Noah and Gasol to try to figure it out. It's how can you have four fabulous bigs and somehow have them not match? Fred Hoiberg's job instead of Tom Thibodeau. It's hard to believe that Hoiberg can be a better coach than Thibodeau. I actually find it hard to believe that Donovan's going to be much better than Brooks. I know Brooks was everyone's whooping boy, but the facts were still how much they won and what the ranking was offensively. Everyone criticized that offense. It was ranked number one just about every year. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if it's actually any better. But I think these teams are really curious to me because both of them were the favorites. Both of them had injuries, predominantly Noah for Chicago. If Noah's right and can anchor that defense again, and then you've got Mirotic and Gasol, and Gibson is another defensive player, isn't that enough? But there always seems to be a little something off on the Derrick Rose element. Not just health. It just the whole talk of 17 free agency, everything now the off the court charges. There's just something a little off in that chemistry. You wonder if it's prohibiting them from winning. For Oklahoma City, I don't think there's anything off. And I actually think they're probably the number 2 team in the Western Conference this year, if not challenging the Warriors. If I had, 1 through 5 in the West is hard. Warriors are 1. I think I go Oklahoma City 2. I think I go Houston 3 on the simple thought that I think Chris Paul at some point misses some games. Clippers 4. I think Spurs could be 5 very easily. Memphis 6. Then we get to New Orleans, which is an interesting. Everyone has New Orleans set at 7 because of Anthony Davis, rightfully so. Kid's an MVP candidate. They probably make 7. But otherwise, that roster to me is funky, and the injuries are bad. It's curious to me to see what they're going to do now. You now have Alexis Ajinka out 6 to 8 weeks, so it's a little less now. Omir Ashik is now out 3 weeks. Their starting center now is Kendrick Perkins, unless they're just going to go crazy small and play Drew Holiday, Eric Gordon, Tyreek Evans, Ryan Anderson, and Anthony Davis, which is an incredible offensive lineup. When it's been on the floor, it's one of the best offensive lineups in the NBA. If you go look at the 5-man lineup data of New Orleans, but it can't defend at all. The other question I have on New Orleans, and maybe maybe again we have a coaching staff change there, so maybe you're going to end up with something different. But I have a hard time actually thinking that that's true. The other thing that's interesting on New Orleans is their just overall lack of depth. I think they're probably 7th. I mean, I think even with all the injuries, they had a ton of injuries last year. They got into the playoffs at 8. I do feel like there's a level right now where New Orleans has just been anointed this spot on the standings at 7th, and I question a little bit of whether it's all there. If Drew Holiday, who's under a minute restriction, gets injured and can't play, then Norris Cole is their backup point guard, or is it Tyreek Evans? So then you're playing Tyreek Evans and Eric Gordon. I don't hate Tyreek Evans like a lot of people do, but it's interesting. And their small forwards are Dante Cunningham, Quincy Pondexter, Alonzo G, and Chris Douglas Roberts. The roster just doesn't totally line up, frankly. It just doesn't. And to me, that's what gets interesting about New Orleans. Is I understand, and I'm not underplaying the value of Anthony Davis. To some extent, I'm sitting here telling you that I think Sacramento is a playoff contender because of the fact that they have DeMarcus Cousins. Well, then the same thing should go for Anthony Davis, and Anthony Davis doesn't have the sideshow elements of DeMarcus Cousins. But in a lot of ways, if I look at the New Orleans roster and I look at the Sacramento roster, I kind of like the Sacramento roster better. And frankly, George Karl's got a much better track record than Alvin Gentry, as much as I am a big fan of Alvin Gentry. It's interesting. Best offensive lineups in the NBA last year, it depends where you set the minute barrier. But when you start to get to lineups that actually played a lot last year, the Chris Paul, J.J. Redick, Matt Barnes, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan lineup was the best lineup that's out there. If you start to go put the minutes level at, it's hard to say. 5-man groups don't play a lot together. But if you go put the minute level to 400 minutes together, so now that these groups really have played some, actually there aren't very many 5-man groups that play 400 minutes, but then you get into some of these lineups that have all had changes this year, so it's going to be interesting to see who comes out as the best, right? So the best lineup is the Clippers, who don't have Matt Barnes anymore along the way, and then you have Atlanta's that doesn't have DeMar Carroll anymore. You have Dallas's that doesn't have Tyson Chandler anymore. But I think the Clippers still, to this conversation of who's kind of the best, the Clippers still have the best offensive lineups of anyone in the NBA. So if they stay healthy, I think it gets to be pretty good. Anyway, that wasn't entirely. A few other notes. Dallas is so injury-riddled right now. Jeremy Evans really might get a shot, which would be awesome. Hope that's the case. But without Chandler Parsons, Justin Anderson's been getting a start. Without without Wesley Matthews, John Jenkins has been getting a start, and if Wesley has developed any of his small forward skills, he's kind of next in line in that group. I think they'll end up starting 2 point guards, and if Chandler Parsons and Wesley Matthews aren't ready, I do like John Jenkins a little bit, but there's an opportunity there for Jeremy if he can slide to play the 3, which we hope to have be the case. Sacramento played a good deal last night with Willie Cauley-Stein and DeMarcus Cousins together. George Karl came out and said he thought Willie Cauley-Stein could end up playing 1,500 minutes this year, which is on a winning team's a lot, on a losing team's actually not very many. But it tells you a little bit of where he thinks that team is. Box scores I find very, very difficult to look at and garner anything from in the preseason in any way. You know, it's hard to get excited, particularly if you didn't watch the game. It's very difficult to tell anything from the box score. The only one that's interesting is Doug McDermott, who had such a miserable year last year, is putting up some half-decent offensive numbers for Chicago, but again, it's hard to tell what they mean at all, and who you're playing against, and what it means. Stanley Johnson has continued to put up good numbers for Detroit. We'll see him opening night. He had 12.7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. The activity level there, I think, is real. You can take something out of that. So it's hard to tell. I have a hard time. I look at every box score that comes through and try to garner something from it, but I find it a bit difficult. It was interesting last night. Sacramento didn't start Ben McLemore. I think that's George Karl kind of playing games with young players, trying to get them engaged and to figure out who they are and what they're going to do. He started James Anderson as his shooting guard. I'm sure that's not their starting shooting guard. Bellinelli played 30 minutes, and Ben McLemore only played 15. McLemore very much a key to what I think is going to be a Sacramento team that's good. Jimmer played last night. He went 0 for 4 in 11 minutes in his return to Sacramento. He did, interestingly, have 3 rebounds and 2 assists last night in that game. Hard to tell, again. All right, let's go to the Jazz. Trevor Booker suspended for 1 game for the open hand to Roy Hibbert. It's actually less than maybe a lot of people thought. I do think there's 2 circumstances that are playing here. One, Hibbert fully instigated, walked across the entire court and chested up on Booker. Second thing is, frankly, how Hibbert was able to walk across the entire floor without an official stopping him at some point in time is on the officials a little bit. And I wonder whether the NBA put that into the equation at all to hold Booker to just 1 game, because if Trevor had instigated it and walked across the court and done this, I think it's one thing. But when Trevor's standing there and Hibbert comes from below the rim out to 35 feet, chests up on you, and nobody is involved, yes, the suspension says, hey, Trevor, we need you to not hit someone with an open hand. But on the other end, this suspension also says it's part of our responsibility as a league to police these events and make sure that they're not happening. And I think the officials might have missed on that one a little bit, and that might have something to it. I mentioned the injuries in New Orleans. I think these are the reasons why Jeff Withey has a really good chance to make this team. And if the Jazz were to not put Jeff Withey on this roster, New Orleans would sign him in 5 seconds. And there is a level here when you start to fill out this roster for the Jazz. If you let a player go to if you put a player in the D League, you don't have his rights. Anybody can sign him. If you put Withey into the D League, I think that he gets signed immediately. To some extent, I've been saying this the whole time, that I feel like very much of this, how this plays out this year is largely going to be impacted by things other than how the players play. If Tibor Pleiss isn't quite ready, it increases Withey's chance. If Howell Neto is really good and Trey Burke's really good, then Bryce Cotton could be really good and he might not. Like, I just think that the poor guys are trying to make this team. Actually, their play is only a part of the equation of whether or not they make it or not. I think it's very complicated. Triple wing tonight will be interesting, particularly if we see Bledsoe, Brandon Knight combination playing together. Then who guards Bledsoe, who guards Knight? They're also 2 fairly good-sized guards, where Trey Burke is undersized in both matchups tonight. So Howell Neto. So do we see the triple wing again from the Jazz? Defensively, how does the triple wing go? It was notable to me that Quinn Snyder the other night said he liked the triple wing because of the fact that it helped them defensively. Do we see it tonight as the Phoenix Suns play with Brandon Knight. They play with Eric Bledsoe. Their backup is Archie Goodwin and Ronnie Price, and we'll see the rookie Devin Booker, Sonny Weems, who's been in Moscow the last few years. Interesting name to keep an eye on tonight. One of the players I think could have a breakout year. T.J. Warren, 14th pick of the 2014 draft, scored 25 points a game at NC State, is their backup small forward. I think he could have an impact tonight. So keep an eye on that. Earl Watson is in the house tonight. How cool is that? As an assistant coach for Jeff Hornacek. We'll get to see Earl, check in with him. Howell Neto, I was going back through some sound. Interesting, Howell Neto, I asked him, first thing I think people don't know, Howell Neto's dad was a pretty good player. So Neto moved around a bunch as a kid. His dad was a player in Brazil, played a lot of pro basketball, Brazilian pro basketball. That's the environment that Neto grew up in, is around that. His father, a real student of the game, is why he was such a fan of Stockton. Neto's favorite player is Nash, so that'll be cool for Neto tonight to be playing in the arena where Steve Nash made most of his name. Neto said if he could have dinner with three people, it would be Michael Jordan, John Stockton, and Steve Nash. Interesting, he probably could get dinner with John Stockton, and he probably could get dinner with Steve Nash at some point in time in his life. Amazing to be at that point. So those are where things stand right now heading into this one. I don't know how much we're going to play, guys, tonight. I would think the travel was kind of funky yesterday. We left at 4 a.m., got here at 7 p.m. I could see that the coaching staff decides to really limit the time on some of these guys tonight. And also the other one is we've got to get Rudy fresh. Rudy's tired from the Euro basketball. Got to keep Rudy engaged, but somehow also get him fresh at the same time. So I'm not sure what the minutes will be in that regard. This might be a nice chance for Travion Graham and J.J. O'Brien and Bryce Cotton and Jack Cooley to really get some minutes along the way here. Interesting side note on Jack Cooley. When he came to the Jazz and we first saw him 15 months ago, I'd say he was borderline NBA player. By practicing and being around an NBA players for 15 months or whatever it's been now, I think he's an NBA player. I think he will get NBA time. He's such a great dude. I think someone will pick him up from the D League during the season. I don't think he'll make the Jazz opening day roster, but he'll get NBA time. He's going to be there. He's going to be dominating the D League. He'll be better than the D League players. Somebody's going to have injuries, and they're going to be able to say, hey, you know what, if we have to throw Cooley out for 12 minutes tonight, he can do it. I'm not sure that's something he could have done originally, so I think that's a huge step in the right direction for Jack Cooley's career. It's also a huge statement of how the D League can be really valuable to letting your players develop, get the experience, and improve for the Jazz. And I think you may see Tibor Pleiss getting some of those minutes and trying to have that same experience for him to be able to adjust to this NBA game. That is today's edition of Tip-Off. Hope you're well. Open scrimmage on the 16th. Hope to see you there. Preseason game Monday against Portland. Look forward to seeing you as well.